We're getting into some better neighborhood now. See? Stores are open. Check it out. Leaving the Ford Model T factory yesterday, I was getting concerned because I want to believe in Detroit. Still hadn't found the roadmap or even the people who would guide us to what the real life here is. So this morning, Vita and I took a trip down to one of these abandoned warehouses, not for the ruin porn, but to look at a piece of modern Detroit history. And I'm not talking about the decline of manufacturing. I'm talking about the music industry. Detroit had something for years that other cities don't have. A thriving rave culture, gone for 20 years in New York and DC, alive 5, 7, 8 years ago here, but destroyed by the anti-rave laws. So when I look at this building, completely destroyed factory, I don't see a manufacturing plant gone. I saw what could have been one of the rebirth paths for this city, which was the music scene. I mean, seriously, parties in here? Look, I'm not a Motown guy. I'm an electronica guy. I mean, you were a DJ, you were a musician. Like,
but you know, all that music that you're into was all European style.
really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's all your favorite artists are European artists.
So what electronic music came out of Detroit then?
Well, this is they say the birthplace of techno, and let's not be confused. You said electronic music and electronica, but I'm talking about techno. That's a specific genre of electronic music, and he was born in Detroit.
I can see why.
Well, I mean, you look at these buildings, and it's no wonder why they had such insane parties here. I mean, look at this place. It's perfect.
There was still a lot more happening elsewhere in the city, and that this is not a reason to be pessimistic at all. Mike Ellison is a Detroit-based musician and artist. I mean, this is not a guy who grew up here and said, I'm staying and figure it out. I mean, he went to UVA. He's not even from Detroit. He studied music business. He was an agent. He worked in sports marketing. But he wanted to go back to music himself. And so he went to Detroit. And here, he started his new life and got married. And he loves it. Detroit ended up being as full of surprises as I'd hoped. In fact, even better. One of them is meeting Detroit-based artist and musician Mike Ellison. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
What's happening, man?
I have so many questions for you, but the first one has to be, Detroit produced so much great music since decades before the collapse that's become the story recently.
Sure.
What is it about Detroit that made it the origin of so much amazing music?
I think as somebody who came to Detroit willingly, I think it's culture, and I think it's adversity, man. You know, out of adversity, you know, you can create some incredible things, and I think there's a lot of rich culture here in Detroit that people don't know. There's over 100 languages spoken in this city. And you also have the great migration from the south to the north of folks who came up to work in factory jobs during the auto boom. And they brought with them blues and jazz and, you know, all kind of styles of music that have just morphed into what you see today. You know, everything from hip hop to rock and roll, techno. Initially, I was working for a sports management firm, representing professional athletes.
A whole different career.
Whole different career, suit, tie, the whole nine.
And then what made you decide to make that change in Detroit?
The artistry, man, it inspires. I mean, you come to Detroit, we got artists falling out of the sky in every discipline. I mean, as you see here, this art installation. So it was inspiring to me, and I wanted to find my creative voice, and Detroit inspired me to do that.
You know, middle of the second day in Detroit, I was more than thrilled at exactly how much further than my greatest hopes we'd come in finding the craziest, weirdest things. And then Ellison brought us to Heidelberg Street. Not a coincidence, named after German city. And Heidelberg Street is where artists came to do something really, really weird. Concerned about violence, drug abuse, and sales, they began painting polka dots on houses and placing art on the sidewalk and attracting attention to these homes where criminals were doing business. The city did not see the logic in this, and the police considered it vandalism. But they brought enough attention to these homes that drug dealing had to move, crime had to move. And the art followed these people to wherever they did business, and they had to flee the neighborhood. And that was the story of Heidelberg Street. It's a story that is so implausible that had I not seen it for myself, I wouldn't believe a word of it.
All right, you're an artist. Before we take off, you got to give us a sample of your freestyle technique. Show us your art.
I gotta give you something.
Give us
All right,
something.
I got you,
All
Alex.
right.
I got
All
you.
right, cool.
Take me cross country next time you ride, and I got you.
In a heartbeat.
All right, there it is.
Bring it.
When I see these economic factors beating down our back doors, competing with eager rappers seems meaningless and backwards. Backwards and meaningless seems rappers eager with competing. I'd rather scrap with financial forecasters who practice unlawful tactics. Jack us forward and backwards but never have to pay corporate taxes. We ought to snatch them off their corporate jets and ask them where the cash is. And if them fascists don't have answers, we smack them up like cashes. Wait, back up, scratch this. Pardon me, Muhammad Ali. Now I beseech these greedy bastards to release the people's assets, or henceforth as pitchforks and storming the castles with the masses. Haven't you seen the 10 Commandments? Damn it, this jam is part 2. And the flows is like Moses. I may have to part you too. My mama grew up in the projects and put 3 of us through college. We are the products of her progress, and as a consequence, I promise never to drop that over the top, look what I got nonsense. So coming from the soul, my grandmother shoveled coal out of potholes in the street for the hot stove to blow heat. The woman got home fatigued but put a pot on to feed at least 5 hungry seeds plus some neighbors who might need. You see, these roots are quite deep. Before you knew me as Mike E. Mike Ellison on my development of music and CDs. Benevolent men and women died so that I might breathe. Benevolent men and women died so that I might be free. I know the backs on which I stand. I know exactly who I am. The afterlife of sacrifice, massacres, and massive strife. So as it were, I have to write, preserve the past and pass the mic to that enlightened young titan crafting words after Mike. Tangent vector. That's right.
Thanks, man.
Everyone's heard about the ruin porn, the car industry, the rise of Motown, and in some cases, even the birth of techno music. But one of the stories of Detroit you never hear are the tech incubators. It just so happened, and I didn't know this until we arrived yesterday, that one of my favorite websites, textfromlastnight.com, was born in Detroit. And that Ben Bader, who I'd exchanged many Facebook messages with, was a Detroit native. And that he was here in a very lavish tech incubator in the Madison building. And that his is not alone among the local tech companies or startups that have come to Detroit specifically because the talent pool is pretty strong. The car companies are looking among the local tech talent to hire. And that all of this has led to one of the most beautiful and mellow and zero BS tech incubators I've ever seen in my life. And I've been to a lot of them in New York, in LA, in Silicon Valley. Like Heidelberg Street, I would not have believed this could exist if I hadn't seen it myself.
Ben, thank God we found you.
Oh, thank God I'm here.
Because you are now going to tell us about the part of Detroit nobody talks about. This does not involve sports. This does not involve architecture. This does not involve music. This involves the tech startup community in Detroit. And for me, and I think for the face of it, you're the guy. How did you start Text From Last Night? What is it?
Well, we started Text From Last Night because we had too many text messages from friends who had been a little overserved and needed a little bit of reality check. So we decided to put them all online and to kind of, not humiliate them, but kind of make fun in a nice way. So we had all their texts, we put them up anonymously with just their area code, and then we opened it up to the public so other people could do so as well.
So people always talk about going to, Silicon Valley or New York City or occasionally LA if you want to raise startup capital and go recruiting.
Right.
But we're in Detroit.
Right.
This is the one place you never hear about people coming to Detroit to do that.
Right. Well, it used to be, you couldn't go to Detroit and raise money. You couldn't go to Detroit and sell a company. But now we have capital here, we have space like this, and it's really a place where you can start a company, put your head down, work, really build a great product, and then sell it to the world.
Obviously, the real estate's cheap.
Right, real estate's cheap.
We hear about American companies outsourcing so much, but here in this city, which is, by the description of any major journalist, completely destitute and going nowhere, other than some cool parties and maybe some cool records, you have an example of the best thing that could be happening in this country, which is major corporate insourcing. Now we were getting into what made Detroit special. Detroit is exactly what I hoped it would be. It is completely and utterly the very best of what Berlin is to Europe, and that so many Europeans don't see about Berlin. It's one of the last places one can actually start over for real and be free of the shackles of the high cost of New York rent, the expectations of a California LA agent, and live, for real, live. It's not the last place one should consider going, it's the first place. If you're an artist, if you want really to be free, Detroit will be something really special that people are going to look back from in 20 or 30 years and say, why didn't I think of being there when I had the chance? Well, I'll tell you this about Detroit. I just saw a fire truck stop traffic, make a U-turn, and I'm not convinced the call was canceled. I think they might just be lost. And that might be the last thing I say about Detroit. Well, let me tell you about Detroit. Okay, I've seen more cars go through red lights in Detroit than anywhere else in the world ever in my life. I'm not talking about flashing reds. I'm talking about full-on, hard red lights. People just go through them. And there's no sign that says right on red. In fact, there's nothing about the city that suggests that's legal. Everything about the city suggests that the cops don't care. In fact, I haven't seen any cops either. It's kind of like the cops have gone on strike and OCP hasn't deployed Ed 209. This is very weird, very weird. Look, here comes another fire truck. And now his lights are on, their lights are on, they're making U-turns. What's going on in this city? Explain that to me. That fire truck was coming this way. Lights blazing. He makes a U-turn, turns his lights off. Clearly the call's canceled. That fire truck goes this way and then keeps going. And then I'm stopping at this red. I don't care if they do or they don't.